My name is Thorsten Overgaard. I'm a Danish photographer. I travel the world teaching photography and taking photographs. Today I will talk about what you as a photographer or as an artist can learn from Chick Corea. Chick Corea have always been a great inspiration for me in more than one way. I've known his music for the last 20 years something, and I always like to just put on headphones and just play his music really loud, especially when he had Chick Corea electric band, and that had to be played really loud. That's also what he did in concerts. And then he had acoustic band, and that didn't have to be played that loud. But there's something about it. If you don't know Chick Corea, you will after this video, and you're gonna go research on Spotify and Tidal. You can listen to his music. The interesting thing about his music for me is that I don't know a lot about instruments or how you make music and stuff like that. And his music is extremely advanced. The rhythm changes, the speed, everything changes. So you're like, what's going on here? And somehow I learned that doesn't really matter what's going on. It's just I listened to the music and it was just very playful and it was very inspiring. So many times when I did graphic design in my former life, I was just put on the headphones, listen to Chick Corea, close my eyes, and I would just imagine things. And then when I had imagined it, I would go sit by the drawing table and do it. I've been to lots of concerts with him, and one thing I always noticed at concerts is that like 50% of the audience are musicians. So you'll see really world famous musicians sitting in the audience with Chick Corea, and they're trying to study this master because that's what he was. And one thing that I noticed that, well, there's actually a lot of things, and that's why I'm doing a whole video about Chick Corea. There's lots of things that you can learn from Chick Corea. And what I would do is I would often go to his website and then we'll see if there's anything Chick is doing that I should be doing. And sometimes I would learn some new. So let me just give an example. So Chick Corea would tour the world playing concerts. He would do that all the time, every year. And he would even have in Blue Note in New York, this famous jazz club, he would have a residence there for weeks where he would just play every night and have changing musicians coming in and play with him. But he was tour all the time, and he was actually planning, that's one reason he didn't know he was going to pass away now. He was planning tours for 2021, 22, 23, and so on. He was just keeping going, even he was 79 years old. And I'll get into that. But I'll go to his website and I'll see, oh, he's touring. That's like I go around and I do workshop. That's my form of touring. Then he's recording and publishing CDs. And before that it was vinyl. And that was his type of publishing. My type is to publish photographs and to write and publish books. And then he would, he would communicate with his audience. So he wasn't exactly living in an ivory tower. He would communicate, he would type with video blogs, written blogs, he would do online class, he would do all kinds of things. And he was actually also in concert, he would be very much in communication with his audience. So he wasn't lofty, he was very like down to earth. And one of the interesting things that he would say, some of his last words was that he thanked all the musicians he worked with for working with them, playing with them, but also that he learned from them. And that's very unusual to have somebody who is the master and everybody learns from him, and he says, no, I learned from you. And that gives an idea about the type of person he is. So a lot of things that a touring and recording musician does is something that every artist can learn from, because yeah, you should make up stuff, you should compose stuff, and you should publish it, and you should also go out and tour with it somehow. And then you should have some kind of form where you can communicate with your audience and you can get feedback and you can help people, inspire them. And maybe that's one of the really interesting things about Chick Corea is that he really inspired a lot of people. I mean, he inspired me, and I don't play any instrument, and then he inspired a lot of musicians that does play instruments, all kinds of instruments, and I know people in pop music, rock music. Everybody was listening to Chick Corea and tried to figure out how does he do that, because he would just like do magic things. And one of the guys recently said, even if you play a tone wrong, Chick would just improvise with that and go with it and make something out of it. So very playful musician. I mean, it's hard to describe here how it is, but let's just take some of the different things that is really cool about Chick Corea. Chick Corea wrote a book a long time ago, and it's a book that I got the original book, and I also got it when it came as an e-book, and when he republished it recently, I've been buying like 20 of them, and I give them away to singers and musicians and photographers, everybody I knew. I just gave this book, and I recommend a lot of people to buy it, and I recommend you to do it also. And it's a very short book, and it's basically his experience so far on being a composer and musician and artist. And some of the things you will see, one of the things that is directly applicable to you if you're a photographer is that he would say, in terms of composition, you just come up with something and you go with it. So he didn't overthink anything, he just said, oh, this is funny, I'll go with it. It's kind of like if it feels right, it's right. And that's something that you can learn from Chick Corea, but there's actually a lot of things he talks about in that book. To be competent at anything, you have to drill. And that's one thing actually Chick Corea in his book tells how he makes himself familiar with a piano. When he comes to a new concert venue, he will get in communication with the piano so he can learn the instrument. But he would also spend lots of time throughout his life drilling his instruments. And that's the same, you have a camera. I always study a camera, all the buttons. I look up what does the word means, what is this thing, what does this do, is it something I need? And suddenly it's just something that just sits in your hand and becomes an extension of you. And that's something that you definitely can learn from Chick Corea, because that's something he did. He drilled, even he was like a master at his thing. He was still drilling, and he was still learning from other people. He was observing, he was playing around with things. He think like, okay, how can I do something new? And if you look throughout his career, he would just constantly just go new directions, try new things, and he would use new instruments like this melody 99 Flowers, where he uses a keyboard. It's like you walk with it like a guitar. Very different sound, and something you would say, no, you go from a Yamaha or Steinway piano and then you go to this, it doesn't make sense, but it did, and it did when Chick Corea was playing with it. So he's always open to new ways of doing things, and it was never below him or something. He could make anything sing. An artist should publish, so that means if you're a photographer, yeah, you should take pictures, but you should also edit them and make final pictures that you can use for something, and then you should put them somewhere. So you put them on a wall, or you should make a print for yourself, or you should put them on Instagram, or you should do something with them. And that's something also you could look at Chick Corea, you could say, what did he do? Well, he published 106 albums in his life. That's 2 albums a year. That's quite a lot for any musician. And often he would have different musicians come in, and he would join up with them and play with them and make an album with a guest musician or a companion or something. But he would publish albums all the time. So and I remember like 15 years ago, I'd go to a record store and I said, oh, there's a new Chick Corea album. And it's almost, sometimes it felt like every time I came into the record store, there was a new Chick Corea album. Not exactly, but it was 2 new albums a year. So an interesting thing that I see with Chick Corea, I also see with Paul McCartney, and I saw it with B.B. King, Van Morrison and others, is that they keep touring. They don't say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to take a rest. No, they keep touring, and that's what Chick Corea did. He did publish albums twice a year. He won Grammys. He's actually the 6th most Grammy-winning musician or artist in the world. But he would just keep touring. He just travel around the world and keep touring and keep doing his thing and playing music and creating inspiration. So a really interesting thing about Chick Corea is that he inspired so many people to become better at what they do and play music and be more playful with it. And it's not that he was actually considering himself a teacher. He said that when he goes out, when he goes on a tour, what him and the venue expect to happen is they're going to create music. They're going to play music, kind of entertain people. But at the same time, he would inspire people. And the foundation of that is kind of like that he was interested in other people and in what they felt when he played music, rather than he was interested, like, look at me, I'm up here at the stage, I'm like Chick Corea. He didn't have any of that. It was always like he was playing and he was looking at the audience, how do they take this? And then he would change whatever he needed to change to give them something. And it wasn't something artificial, that was just the way it was. And I don't know how you can apply that as a photographer or as an artist. It's kind of like how it should be. You should be playing your music or making your photograph because you think it's fun, not because somebody's gonna like you or think that you're a great guy or girl. So you should do it first and foremost because you love to do what you're doing, and you should get it out there, and then it can inspire other people and make them happy to look at or listen to or whatever you're doing. When you read the book Chick Corea made, and also you can see the documentary that was made about 1.5 years ago about Chick Corea, where he goes into the studio, is that he's even everything he does is very advanced, but it's also very playful and it's very simple. And that's something I always like when things are simple. Well, I like simple cameras like the LEICA here, but I also like to understand things to a point where it becomes really simple. So even it's very advanced, or what you make with something or what you're doing seems very advanced or it's like high level, it should be simple. It should be simple to make it. And that's something that he was actually a master of. And that's what you can see. He wasn't serious about anything. He was just like, no, we do it like this. And one example was that he said, people try to put, what kind of music do you do? And he said, well, you could say you could go into a record store, they will put him on the jazz or fusion jazz because they have to put it somewhere. But for him, he said, no, I just play music. I don't care what kind of music it is. I just play whatever music I feel like playing. And I love that. That's also in photography, it's very applicable in the way that people have an idea that they should find their style, and they mean the category, but you don't have to be in a category. Your style of photography is what you do. And it doesn't matter if you photograph house or cars or people or race cars or landscapes or birds. Your style of how you do it is going to be something that can be seen in your pictures, and that's your style, and that's what you do. You do photography, or you do music, or you do books, you write books. You shouldn't be writing a category, you should just be writing whatever comes from you. So even Chick Corea lived a rock star life most of his life, and he kept touring and everything. He was completely bright and sane and drug-free. And that's like one of the things I really like about artists, that you should be drug-free. You should be yourself, and you should be bright, and you should be able to think. And you can't do that with drugs. This idea that sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and you should die when you're 27, that's bullshit. Because if you look at, like, Jimi Hendrix, he did 3 albums, Chick Corea did 106, The Doors did 9 albums. That says everything. Like, it's not something that you as a fan or audience think, oh, that's great. He just did 3 albums and then he died. What if Jimi Hendrix had done 106 albums? That would be awesome. But he didn't, because he died of drugs. So that's one thing also that you can learn from Chick Corea and other artists that don't do drugs. They just keep touring, they keep producing, they keep staying bright and clean, and that's how it should be. The other idea that you have to be weird and on drugs to be an artist, that's That's another thing. It's just don't go there. Stay drug free. That's that's important. So that was my talk about Chick Corea, and that is your home assignment this week, is to study Chick Corea, listen to his music, watch the documentary. There's a link to it here below, where he goes in his, he built a really amazing studio. Matt had a studio in Los Angeles, and you can see in the documentary how he's working with musicians from all the world, creating an album that he just kind of got the idea, let's do it, and he calls everybody in and they just do an album, and it's like the quality is sky high in so many ways. So look at that documentary and see if you can get hold of his book. I also have a link below here to the book, and then you can go to his website and you can see the different categories, like what was he up to, what was his website about, what was he doing, and of course you can go study. You can study his story on Wikipedia. You can see he won a lot of Grammys, he did a lot of albums, he worked with a lot of different people, and that's actually one thing that I see with Chick Corea that I haven't applied, and I try to think, how can I do that? Because he kind of had like power to power, like he was this big fantastic musician and star, and he had a big fan base, but he would still go on tour with we do different setups. We go on tour with a banjo player, then we have acoustic band, then you have electric band, then he would change the people in the band. He would have new young people, and he would find talent, and he would kind of like move them into the limelight, and then they would start their own career. Almost you could say like he played with Miles Davis and so on in the past, and then he became his own brand, Chick Corea, and his own style and everything. But that tradition of like mixing it up with so many people and not just stay with the same 5 guys for all the years to play with them, but just change it up all the time. That's a very interesting little detail also that I would love to see how could I apply that in my career. So it's just about me all the time. But anyway, take this as your homework for a week. Study a great artist like Chick Corea and see what can you learn from that in your trade. That's all I had to say today. As usual, there's a link below the video where you can sign up for my mailing list and you get a free ebook immediately. That's all I had to say. Till I see you next time, remember to always wear a camera.